Little Rock 9. Students' rights to desegregated education and the responsibility of the community and government to allow that. Presented by Abigail Bjorley and Jackson Derby. Who were the Little Rock 9? Why was their situation important?
The Little Rock Nine were the first African American students to enter Little Rock Central High School in 1957. After Brown versus Board of Education, students were given the right to an education and educational facilities that weren't based on the color of their skin. And the Little Rock Nine were some of the first to exercise that right. It had been the government and the community's responsibility to enforce and support these decisions. It took many tries for the Little Rock Nine to prove their rights and overcome the racism in the educational system, but after a hard journey, they finally won their battle to the best of their abilities. Early context.
Racism was, and still is, something ingrained in the world's society. From the early days of the United States, slavery was a prominent thing, specifically with African Americans. A main reason for the U.S.'s Civil War was the differing views on the banning of slavery in the newer U.S. territories. Even after slavery was abolished in 1865, segregation and Jim Crow laws existed to keep freedom away from the African Americans and their families. Segregated hotels, hospitals, bathrooms, schools, and more were implemented up until the mid-1900s, when African Americans began bigger movements for equal rights. Build up.
A large win for civil rights activists was Brown versus the Board of Education. In the 1954 case, it was decided in court that segregation, specifically in schools, was unconstitutional. Segregated schools were told to begin opening their doors to colored students as soon as their proper plans and schedules were finished. Among these schools, the Little Rock Central High School in Arkansas was responsible for beginning their plans to allow African American students as well.
Though it was now a right of African American children to have access to the same educational buildings as white children, many education boards, including Little Rock's, delayed the integration. A handful of lawsuits were filed against the Little Rock Student Board in 1955 and 1956 because of the delays. Eventually, after much discourse, Little Rock was set to allow African American students into the school.
The main event.
On the 3rd of September 1957, the 9 African American students arrived to start their school day. However, they were unaware that, the night before, Arkansas Governor Orville Faubus had called the state's National Guard to, quote-unquote, maintain and restore order. The soldiers stood outside of the school and didn't allow the 9 to enter. Later, on the 23rd, when the 9 had managed to enter the building, they were quickly escorted out for their safety. The community had begun to riot outside of the school, further showing their reckless irresponsibility of welcoming the 9 students.
President Dwight D. Eisenhower himself had to intervene on the 24th, ordering units of the U.S. Army's Airborne Division into Little Rock to transport the children and keep order. On September 25, 1957, with protection from the soldiers, the Little Rock Nine made it inside for their first full day of school. Federalized Arkansas National Guard troops had to stay within the school for the rest of the year.
The main event continued. During their time at Little Rock Central High, the students were subjected to relentless abuse, both verbal and physical. White students who tried to help or befriend any of them were treated with similar harassment. One of the 9 students, Minnie Jean Brown, ended up expelled for fighting back against the treatment. After being expelled, many white students gave out cards that said 1 down, 8 to go.
Despite the torment and racist treatment, the remaining 8 students managed to complete their school year. There was still heavy protest each day they went to school, but they persevered, fighting for their educational rights. Ernest Green was the first African American student to graduate from Central High School. Immediate impacts. In the following few years, riots, rallies, and other angry mobs tried to fight off against the desegregation of school systems, including the Little Rock schools. Most, if not all, failed, but not without causing disturbances like more delays and less willing supporters of desegregation.
Many schools temporarily closed, both in protest of the new laws and to protect African American students from enduring what the Little Rock Nine had to endure. Only 3 of the original 9 ended up graduating from the high school, with the others either transferring or being expelled. The aftermath.
After the main events of Little Rock 9, participants, specifically the Little Rock 9 themselves, went on to receive awards from the NAACP, short for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. They were able to use their experiences to help them progress in their careers, and they became role models for other children growing up in recently desegregated schools.
The Little Rock 9 events have become moments in history we can look back on to remind ourselves of where we came from. It serves as a reminder of the irresponsibility of our past, as well as the redemption. For the African American community, it's an incredibly important chapter for the fight of civil rights. The struggles that the 9 children were able to overcome can be beacons of hope in the face of adversity.
Thank you for watching and listening. We hope you took as much interest in the Little Rock 9 as we did and appreciate the ways our country has grown.